Chelsea have confirmed they've parted company with their head coach Enzo Maresca.
Les supporters londoniens qui quittent le stade après à peine 1 heure de jeu. Et au lieu du 2-1.
There are ways you can lose and ways you can accept defeat. This wasn't one of them.
Oh my God.
There will be repercussions for this.
I said before it was a huge game. I said they needed to win. They just got totally outplayed. It goes in terms of these records for this club, which now is pivotal. You know.
Yeah, I can tell you now that Liam Rosenior has left Chelsea. Chelsea have decided to make a change. Back in January, he signed a contract until 2032.
On the Chelsea front, Sam, it's 14 won, 14 lost and 10 drawn in this Premier League campaign. 3 league wins since January and Tottenham are safe.
For the second time in 4 years under the BlueCo reign, Chelsea have finished a Premier League season in the bottom half of the table. Chelsea lost on the final day of the season away at Sunderland. As Liam Twomey from The Athletic put it, it had all of the best hits from a truly, truly forgettable season. Red cards, Wesley Fofana, the second time he got sent off the season. Malo Gusto scored an own goal. The team lacked fight. The team lacked any kind of meaning in any real sense. They looked like a team on the beach. Obviously, Champions League football with Bournemouth's draw at Man City earlier that week meant that it was mathematically impossible, regardless of the coefficient, and if Villa finished 5th, they actually ended up finishing 4th anyway. So for Chelsea, they knew that the very best that they could do was Europa League, and they botched it. Another season in the Conference League would have been too much for myself personally. I hated the Conference League the first time we were there. I did not want us to be back. And I do think that in many senses, a clean season for Xabi Alonso, clean in the sense of no European football. We saw how much Man United benefited from that when Michael Carrick came in. The season was a mess. Red cards aplenty, own goals, ill discipline, 2 sacked coaches. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But I just want to sit here and ponder, how did a season that started so brightly end so poorly? Welcome welcome back to Kitso's Blues. My name is Kitso. These are more often than not my blues. Today we are looking at the absolute dumpster fire that was the 2025-2026 season. This season had incredible highs and even lower lows. When you look at everything that transpired over the last 9 months, from technically it starting in New Jersey with us winning the Club World Cup, beating unequivocally the best team in the world, PSG 3-0. Enzo Maresca coached an absolute masterclass against the best manager in the world in Luis Enrique, to at one point going effectively 2 months without winning a football match, going several games at a time without being able to score a goal. The dichotomy is a real scary one. Is this the worst season in modern Chelsea history? Spoiler alert, it is. Re-examining the progress that Chelsea made during Maresca's first season serves as a perfect indicator as to the strides that the club were making. 24-25 was by no means a perfect campaign. Chelsea were as high as 2nd in the table around Christmas before finding themselves as low as 6th, but they were able to string enough wins together in April and in May to qualify for the Champions League. The first time that had been the case under the BlueCo ownership. Going into the Club World Cup, Chelsea had finished 4th, just won the Conference League. So not only had they come 4th, they had also picked up their first piece of silverware. Now, many people would be dismissive and say it's only the Conference League, but you can only win the competitions that you're in. Like I said, Chelsea hadn't qualified for the Champions League in going on 3 years. They won the Conference League, they were in it. It would have been far more embarrassing if they didn't. And there was a real sense of optimism. Chelsea, relatively speaking, breezed their group. I'm lying. Chelsea came 2nd. That 3-1 defeat against Flamengo left a sour taste in my mouth. Nicholas Jackson got like his 2nd red card in 4 games that he played at that point. Wins over Benfica, Palmeiras, Fluminense, and then obviously beating PSG 3-0 in the final was genuinely, for me personally, it was one of the most incredible feelings supporting Chelsea. Not exactly up there with the Champions League back in 2021, but it was still a gorgeous, gorgeous win. There was a great deal of optimism going into the new season, even if Chelsea only had about 3 weeks to prepare for it. Obviously, Levi Colwill tore his ACL on the first day of preseason. Maresca openly, in press conferences building up to the Crystal Palace game, he said, if we are going to achieve anything, we're going to need a replacement for Levi Colwill.
I think we need a central defender, but we see also we are looking for internally a solution. But as I said, the club knows exactly what I think.
He is unequivocally the best centre-back in this team. The sporting director's reluctance to not sign a centre-back in his absence when someone like Piero Hincapié was available, given he spent the year on loan at Arsenal. I think Arsenal are only going to make his move permanent like now, but we theoretically could have gotten him in on loan for a year and then just like sent him back to Leverkusen or even signed him permanently. I mean, he's 23, he's got bags of experience, he can play centre-back, he can play left-back, he can play in a 3. The fact that there was a real reluctance to not sign a Colwill replacement, even after Maresca, who at this point had a great deal of credit in the bank for everything that he'd achieved in his first year, probably even exceeded expectations with the Club World Cup win. It was a bonus, like an extra $100 million, and that left a real sour taste in, I think, everyone's mouths. We all knew Levi Colwill was so integral to the system. He was told to focus on players like Trevor Chalobah, Wesley Fofana, Josh Achimpong. Jorel Hato was also signed, which actually brings me nicely onto the signings that we made. We signed Joao Pedro like midway through the Club World Cup. He scored a brace against his boyhood club Fluminense in the World Cup semis, and then he got the third goal in the final. He's been outstanding for us this season. Jamie Gittins came in. Estevao, who had been signed like 18 months prior, had turned 18 during the Club World Cup, so it meant that he was now eligible to join the first team. Obviously, we signed Alejandro Garnacho on deadline day. Andre Santos, who obviously isn't a signing, he'd belonged to us since like Jan of 2023, but he was ready to now make that leap. He captained Strasbourg very impressively. He was one of their outstanding players. He was used as like a hybrid 8. He got double digits for goals and assists in that final season. That was about it. When you look at the makeup of the squad, Liam Delap, how could also joined. For as poor as he was throughout the season, I do think that the working out for his signing actually makes a lot of sense. He had scored 12 goals in his debut Premier League season at Ipswich, a side that got relegated. The thinking was he was initially going to play as a backup / in tandem with Nicholas Jackson. Jackson fell out of favour with Maresca given his really poor attitude and disciplinary issues towards the end of the 24-25 season. On paper, the signings were okay. None of them really felt like potential needle movers aside from like Estevao. We signed 3 wingers in Garnacho, Estevao, and Jamie Gittins. All of them were under the age of 21. Only one of them had Premier League experience in Garnacho. None of them had actually scored more than 12 goals the season prior. They were all gambles in their own right. And it felt like with Pedro Neto, who had a good first campaign, maybe wasn't the best winger in the world. He's much better in a transitional team. I think that's also why he succeeded at Wolves. He had so much space to run into. He was always stretching teams. But in a ball-dominant side like Chelsea, his skill set didn't really translate the same way. There were still reasons to believe that Chelsea would at the very least qualify for the Champions League. Obviously, not having that Colwill replacement really did come back to bite Chelsea, but the early signs were positive for sure. I think for myself, the best way to make sense of the 25-26 season is to break it up quite literally in half. You have the first half of the season, July to January, when Maresca was in charge, and then the second half of the season is literally everything else that happened since. Starting off in August, Chelsea played 2 preseason games in the weeks leading up to the season. They won both of them quite comfortably against AC Milan, and I think the other one was against Bayer Leverkusen. Both played at Stamford Bridge. That really did build up the optimism, like, hey, maybe these guys having like a minimal break, although I guess we all can forget how long a season is, might just help them like capitalize on that momentum, and then obviously they would need to find rest where and when possible. But on the opening day against Crystal Palace at home in the sweltering August sun, Chelsea laboured to a 0-0 draw. They didn't look great. They looked like a team who was like at the beginning or maybe only halfway through preseason against Crystal Palace, who were much sharper, who were much more ready for the task at hand. For me personally, it was the first warning sign that, hey, we might have a difficult season just off the basis of chronic insurmountable fatigue, if nothing else. There wasn't really much to speak about from this opening game. Eze, who was still at Palace at the time, crazily scored a free kick, but I think it was Mark Gahey who encroached on the Chelsea wall on the edge of their box. So the goal was disallowed. Chelsea looked undercooked that day. The most notable thing that happened was Estevão's introduction on the hour mark. Jamie Gittins had started on the left wing and he just didn't look up to speed. He didn't play at the Club World Cup. He played about 40 minutes for Dortmund and then he moved, so he was cup tied for the tournament. And then I guess between that and the 3 weeks of preparation and rest that Chelsea had, Jamie Gittins just looked super unprepared for the game. He came off after an hour. When Estevão's number came up that he was going to be replacing Gittins, Stamford Bridge quite literally rose to its feet in excitement, in anticipation. For Chelsea, he was a very rare shining light throughout the campaign. This was a guy who was labeled Messinho, Little Messi, back in his native Brazil. He scored that scorcher against us in the quarterfinals when he was still at Palmeiras. There was a real sense of anticipation for him, and I do still think that he will be a phenomenal footballer for us in the hopefully very near future. He came off the bench. He couldn't quite unlock Palace's stout defense. We drew the game 0-0. A lot of the players looked tired. A lot of the players looked out of it. Fast forward a week and we play West Ham at home. They got battered on the opening day. We turned up and we beat them 5-1. I think we scored 3 of our goals that day from corners. Nobody knew it at the time. That really did become like a big theme of this Premier League season. We beat West Ham 5-1 super convincingly. Estevão got his first assist. He was meant to start again on the bench. Cole Palmer pulled out due to like a groin issue in the warm-up. So Estevão came in. He got an assist. He looked incredible on that right wing. He and Pedro Neto for those first couple of weeks dovetail really well with each other. Another week goes by and then we play Fulham at home. We beat Fulham 2-0. It was maybe a slightly fortuitous result given we actually conceded first. Trevor Chalobah was like stepped on by Josh King and VAR after the goal was scored consequently ruled it out. We were maybe lucky to get away with that one. João Pedro scored a header. Enzo Fernandez scored a penalty. We won 2-0. João Pedro was really one of the outstanding players throughout most of this dreadful campaign. He scored 1 goal and I think he got 2 assists against West Ham. He scored against Fulham. He looked like a live wire. I think João Pedro is in many ways a real-time lesson for what Premier League proven quality looks like in this Chelsea side. Of all of the players we signed, he was the oldest at 23 and he looked ready to go from day one. Obviously he scored that brace. He hadn't played for about 2 or 3 months at that point, so he was considerably fresher than everyone else, but he looked like a guy that was ready to go. He looked like a guy who was ready to really like take the season by storm. Obviously Nicholas Jackson was loaned out to Bayern for the season, but he looked like he was ready to fill that number 9 role. Chelsea ended August in 3rd, 2 wins and a draw, unbeaten. Performances weren't quite fully there just yet, but there was still more than enough optimism for the season that we could potentially have. September would prove to be the first really difficult month that Chelsea would go through this season. Obviously going into the international break, the spirits were relatively high. Winless in 3, winning 2 of them, 3rd in the league, 7 points from a possible 9. All of these things did bode well. But September is when we really started to see a lot of the issues that would later plague and eventually derail Chelsea's season. It started with a 2-2 draw away at Brentford. It was the first time that Chelsea were also going to be playing 3 matches in a week. They couldn't rotate in the same way that they did in the Conference League the year prior, because obviously the quality of opposition in the Conference League was considerably lower than it was in the Champions League. And Chelsea in 1 week had Brentford away, Bayern away, and Man United away. They drew 2-2 with Brentford. Enzo Maresca started a super rotated 11. These squad rotations proved to be really detrimental to the momentum the team had. In terms of keeping said momentum, we really did struggle with that, going from effectively making 7 or 8 changes between match days more than once or twice a week. And he started a completely rotated 11. Players like Tosin, Facundo Buonanotte. The fact that he even played for Chelsea at some point this season is quite crazy. Liam Delap. They just weren't at the level, Jamie Gittins. They just weren't at the level that the starting 11 were. We got away with very heavy rotation in the Conference League the year before. But the level of quality of opposition in both the league and the Champions League would not permit that. It would just be as as simple as rotating 7 or 8 first team players and still being able to get the job done. He had to bring on a lot of like the big guys in the second half. Caicedo scored what looked like a late winner, but we conceded from a long throw. Many people tried to attribute the blame to Alejandro Garnacho, but he's like in his 6-yard box and the guy runs almost on his blind side entirely. He's not used to being in those positions defending anyway, so I think it was a little bit harsh. We drew that game 2-2. It was really quite disappointing because the points were there. We fought back from 1-0 down to lead the game going into stoppage time, only to drop 2 points anyway. 3 days go by and we play Bayern. There's a lot of fanfare. It's our first Champions League game in, God, about 3 years. We've built the squad. Enzo Maresca has spent the last 12, 13, 14 months really molding the squad in his image, and this Bayern game really did feel like a reality check. Like, even if we were technically world champions, like Bayern are just a cut above the rest. We obviously saw it in those 2 legs against PSG. And yeah, they just dismantled us entirely. Trevor Chalobah scored an own goal. Cole Palmer brought us back within 1. I think we were 2-0 down and Cole Palmer brought us back within 1. But by the time the third goal in, I think it went in just before half time, we were just fully out of the game. They just managed the game the second half. We did do a relatively good job at keeping them on their toes as best as we could. That game really did feel like a reality check as to where the side maybe actually were. I think for a lot of people who might have been overestimating Chelsea at the time, realized maybe the side are still maybe a year away at the very least to really compete at that level, given it was also our first Champions League game in 2.5 years at that point. That following weekend, we played Man United away, and this is really where a lot of the issues that plagued our season came to fruition. Robert Sanchez got sent off within the first 4 minutes of the game, clipped ball in behind our defense, saw Brandon Mbeumo 1-on-1 with Sanchez, and he just clattered him. At full time, Maresca said he would have rather just let Mbeumo score the goal and we play with 11 versus 11 even if we are a goal down, because at that point we've still got about 86 minutes left to get back into the game. But Sanchez gets his marching orders. Enzo Maresca just absolutely, for lack of a better phrase, he absolutely shat the bed. He made 2 changes. He brought off both Neto and Estevao to solidify. We moved to a back 5. We were playing a 5-3-1. But removing both of your wingers in a game like that, where you are going to have to play on the counter attack, where you're going to have to rely on stout pieces of defending and taking your moments in attack when you can, to remove 2 players who are actually going to be able to do that. We were 2-0 down at half time. Even with Casemiro getting a red card, the game being 10v10, this wasn't a vintage Man United side either. Ruben Amorim really never got Man United to click in the ways that we saw Michael Carrick do over the second half of the campaign. So it was definitely doable to get back into this game. For the life of us, we just couldn't manage it. We ended up losing 2-1. It was a really, really disappointing day. Cole Palmer also limped off with that same groin injury that kept him out for a couple of weeks at the end of August. He wouldn't come back until Leeds in like the first week of December, so we didn't see him for a while. It really was just a disappointing day, and it capped off what really was a disappointing week. And it wasn't just a reality check, but it also really did feel like, okay, this could be a difficult season. Following week goes by and we play Brighton at home. Enzo Fernandez scored an early goal and we were really like managing the game well until like early into the second half. Trevor Chalobah gets found out as the last man. He brings down the Brighton attacker. He also receives a straight red card. It's now our second. I'm going to keep a red card counter one of these sides. He gets sent off. It's our second red card in as many Premier League games. We were winning 1-0 until about the 70th minute, and then just a late flurry of Brighton attacks, particularly 2 goals in stoppage time, ensured that we ended up losing the game 3-1. It was our second red card in a row. We were now winless in our last 4 games. It felt like a lot of our issues between the rotations, the red cards, obviously. Enzo Maresca he just made super defensive subs and we absorbed way too much pressure for way too long in the game. We had to play that game effectively for 40 minutes, a man down, as we played the entirety of the United game a man down the week prior. He was not adapting. He was not learning how to deal with these difficult moments. Yeah, we just ended up losing that game as well. These problems were really starting to feel self-inflicted. It really felt like if we were going to do anything this season, we were going to have to stop shooting ourselves in the foot and reloading. Our final game of the month of September came against Jose Mourinho's Benfica. He had obviously been appointed like earlier that month. We did win that game 1-0, but João Pedro also got sent off in stoppage time. He was sent off for a high boot. we picked up 3 red cards in our last 4 games, but it at least meant that we ended the winless run that we were on. It was a win that felt like, okay, we really did have to grind this one out. It was our first Champions League game at Stamford Bridge, not just for the season, but in about 2.5 years. So there really was like a special atmosphere that night for it to come against Jose Mourinho, one of the club's most lauded servants of the modern era. But at least it meant that we stopped the winless trend and we were ready to take it from there. Chelsea really got their season back on track in October. The win against Benfica did a lot to break that spell that they were on at the time. Their first game in October came against Premier League champions Liverpool. Yeah, this game really did feel like it had that build-up of Barclays games from yesteryear. It was the world champions against the Premier League champions, and even if neither side really were on top form coming into it, obviously Chelsea were recently winless in 4 before that Benfica win in the week, and Liverpool quite inversely had won every game they had recently just played. They were winless in each of their first 5 games from the start of the season, but they also really hit a rough patch that for many who had been watching their games was evident that it had been coming. They relied on very, very late goals, like stoppage time winners, to bail them out. The opening day with Chiesa, Ngumoa's goal against Newcastle. They really were cutting it fine, and they weren't really playing in a way that was all that convincing either. Their luck had, quite fortuitously for us at the time, had run out, but it was time for Liverpool and Chelsea to play. They lost in stoppage time away at Crystal Palace the week prior. They lost 1-0 against Galatasaray in the Champions League. So these were 2 sides that weren't exactly at the peak of their powers. These were 2 sides that had a lot of expectation, maybe slightly differing expectation for the both of them. Liverpool were obviously looking to retain their league title, and Chelsea were just trying to prove that they were exactly like where they belong. So just like from that sense, it really did feel like it had that really, really special build-up. Moise Caicedo scored an absolute scorcher, one of the goals of the season, about 5 or 6 minutes in.
Caicedo skipping away from McAllister. Moises Caicedo built it! Oh, built it! My goodness me!
One of my favorite moments from that game was, there's a still, I'll put it on screen now, of Van Dijk just backing away, or defending, if you will, twerking, or defending, whatever you want to call it. Chelsea just played with this level of dominance, this level of belief. Liverpool were on the ropes for most of it. We just kept on coming at them. We were maybe unlucky to not have more than just the 1 goal. We did go in 1-0 up at half-time. Obviously the second half came out and it was more of the same. Liverpool grew into the game a little bit, but not really. They did get an equalizer through Cody Gakpo on about 63 minutes. Alexander Isak assisted him. I think at that point it was his first assist of the season. First goal contribution since signing for Liverpool. But even then, like, Chelsea just kind of kept on going as if nothing had happened. Estevao came off the bench with about 15 minutes to go. And against an aging and tiring Andy Robertson, he was a handful. And there were 2 or 3 chances right at the end of the game that Chelsea oh so narrowly missed. I think Enzo Fernandez had a shot that maybe clipped off the post. And just those kinds of moments that really make you wonder, like, as a fan, like, oh, is this going to be our day? Are we really going to miss out on 2 points here? And then in the 97th minute, it happened where this low ball in, I think it was from Marco Correa. There were many combinations on the left wing between Garnacho and Cucurella before the goal came that were really like threatening down that side. Chelsea were threatening down both sides. This ball fizzes across the 6-yard box.
Cucurella! Estevao! Blue paradise! Maresca ramping up the touchline to engage!
If Caicedo's goal saw the roof come off that place, then this Estevao goal was just a completely different kettle of fish altogether. Like, it was absolutely insane. It was one of those days that you live for as a fan. Like, as a football fan, it's not just about winning trophies, winning leagues, going on ridiculous, like, unbeaten runs, away days. Like, these are the little moments where your team's just been knocking, and you finally get this goal. And it was incredible. Like, the whole team went to go celebrate with this Brazilian youngster. This kid is a prodigy. This kid is proving that he's not just one for the future, but he's ready to go today. It was a really special moment because Chelsea had a rough couple of weeks, and it felt like Chelsea were going to leave more points on the table, but they didn't. They won the game. For Enzo Maresca, he darted down the touchline in celebration. It had shades of Mourinho, it had shades of Conte in years gone by, these title-winning managers, these managers who were really endeared by the fans, who really endeared themselves to the fans. So there was a bit of a strange discourse around Maresca a little bit before this, where people weren't necessarily asking, is he the right man for the job, but rather, does he have that same like persona of Chelsea managers gone by? And he was a little bit aloof in press conferences. He didn't really hang around too long. He didn't really have many quotable moments either. For many Chelsea fans, it did feel like there was this disconnect between him and the fan base. That moment really did just solidify, like, this is our manager, this is our guy, this is the guy that we are going to go to war with. And those celebrations really, it meant everything. I do think that his general perception around Stamford Bridge shifted that day, and that's, for me personally, what made his eventual departure so much harder to take. That game happened just before the international break, the October international break, and Chelsea came back with a trip to the City Ground and just lost match in what was a ridiculously short spell for any Premier League manager. We beat them 3-0. It was a relatively comfortable day. It was a good day. Only thing is that Malo Gusto got another red card. Maresca got a red card at the end of the Liverpool game for his impassioned celebrations with the fans. It's utter woke nonsense if you ask me, but it is what it is. Yeah, Malo Gusto got a needless red card, which made it 5 for the season. A few more days go by and we beat Ajax at home. We beat them 5-0. And after a really difficult start away at Bayern, it looked like our Champions League season had finally really gotten up and running. We'd now scored 8 goals in our last 2 games, 10 in our last 3 if you're counting the Liverpool win, with only 1 goal conceded in that time. It really felt like we were starting to build some momentum. Our following game against Sunderland, we ended up losing 2-1. This was another really difficult game. It was starting to feel like a season filled with late goals and drama right at the end. Alejandro Garnacho got his first and only Premier League goal of the season in this game against Sunderland. He scored about 4 minutes in. Chelsea never really clicked into gear in the same way. It felt like they left the door ajar for Sunderland, who defended really resolutely. And obviously when you concede a goal that early, it gives you most of the game to fight your way back into it. And they did, and then they went on and scored a stoppage time winner. The pictures at Stamford Bridge, given what they were about 2 or 3 weeks prior when we stole it at the death against Liverpool, were quite mirrored in the sense that we were now the victims of a stoppage time winner. It really did scupper a lot of momentum. It really did feel like, as good as Chelsea might be right now, they are still definitely not the finished product. Title winning sides definitely put Sunderland to bed that day. So it really did just feel like we were always nearly there under Maresca without ever truly getting there. I think that still proved itself like further down the line in the season as well. Nobody really knew it at the time. Chelsea's season would actually peak in November, which is very painful to say in hindsight. There was like a real sense of optimism, particularly at the end of it. But Chelsea really, they look like a side that were really starting to click into gear at almost a very crucial point in the season. Obviously, I think you find out what many teams are made of over that very busy festive period, December going into Jan, and obviously from that point on, Feb, March is like the knockouts of the Champions League, that kind of stuff. But Chelsea were really looking at this point in November like a team that were clicking into gear. After the super disappointing 2-1 defeat at home to Sunderland, they played Karabakh all the way in Baku in Azerbaijan. Our first trip to the country since we won the Europa League there back in 2019. Eden Hazard's final game. Drew 2-2 away to Karabakh, quite disappointingly. Maresca rotated, and it was the same story of Maresca's rotations really depleted the intensity with which the squad played, and the quality was also just not there. And Romeo Lavia, he limped off after about 4 minutes. It was a really disappointing day all around. It was one of those days. Chelsea, I think at this point, had played 5 games. They'd won every single game at home, and they were still to pick up a win in the Champions League away. But obviously a few days later we go away to Tottenham. We beat Thomas Frank Spurs 1-0. It was a game really not many neutrals would have enjoyed. João Pedro was on a bit of a scoring drought. He got us the winner, and the international break came by, and following the international break, back-to-back wins away at Burnley and at home to rock bottom Wolves. We were really close to the top of the table. Arsenal were kind of running away with it, but not really. But we were one of the few teams that were doing our best to keep pace with them. So those back-to-back wins also helped a lot. I think for Chelsea, our season peaked in this one specific week right at the end of November. We played Barcelona and Arsenal within days of each other, and we beat Barcelona 3-0.
Taking on Kabasi and getting past him. Oh, magnificent! That's That's what he's about. Esteban is a shining star.
Hansi Flick's men were not really at full capacity themselves just yet. They also took quite a while to really get going in the league. I remember they lost away to Real Madrid, and that there was a whole lot of fanfare. They didn't look great that day. We beat them 3-0. They played with that ridiculously high line that they do. And Maresca came with this incredible game plan. And he was really starting to make a name for himself with his game plans at this point, where he played Pedro Neto up top and he just had Neto running the channels. It looked like his game plan was to play through Barca's mid-block and then at the first chance of asking to get that ball into Neto to run in behind. It looked like Chelsea were playing as if it was just a matter of when rather than if they would get in behind. And I think they'd had 2 goals disallowed before the first goal, the own goal, stood. So it wasn't like a fluke. It really was a game plan that was being worked with T. And obviously we won the game 3-0. Araujo got that red card just before half-time. And yeah, we just kind of ran away with it in the second half. Barcelona weren't really able to lay a glove on us after that. And then obviously against Arsenal, what really felt like a championship 6-pointer, they came to the bridge. This was a side, like Chelsea at that point really was so high on confidence. They really did look like they were going to match Arsenal. Arsenal were top of the log, but they weren't really playing all that great. A lot of it was being relied on set pieces. They weren't creating much from open play. They had the best defense in the league. There was early talk about them beating the 15-goal record, and obviously that didn't happen. There was a real feeling like if Chelsea can win today, we were 6 points behind Arsenal at kickoff, literally half that gap, and then at that point anything can happen, especially going into the aforementioned busy festive period. And obviously Caicedo, he gets sent off after about 35 minutes. It's a ridiculous challenge. I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, to this day, I still have no idea what he was thinking. Going in that high, that hard, the ball had gone. It actually looked like a potential leg break on Mikel Merino. But yeah, it was just a ridiculous challenge. And we now have to play more than an hour, a man down against the best team in the league. The build-up to that game was touted as Caicedo versus Declan Rice in midfield. And Reece James, for large portions of it, he was obviously helped out by Enzo Fernandez. Against Rice and Zubimendi, he absolutely dominated the game. It was incredible to see how far he had come. He was starting to play complete 90s again. This was a guy who 12-18 months ago, it looked like his Chelsea career was not on life support really, but it really did look like he was struggling. But Maresca really was able to find a way to keep him fit, played him in midfield. Obviously the fact that he played with inverted fullbacks anyway also helped. This was really the best of Reece James we had seen as Chelsea fans since maybe the 21-22 season. It was a very different Reece James performance. Obviously back then he was marauding fullback, contributing goals and assists, but he dominated the midfield that day. We ended up drawing the game 1-1. On another day you'd feel it was maybe 2 points dropped, but against the best team in the league, we played most of that game man down. So there really was like a lot that could have gone against Chelsea that would have maybe ended up losing that game. But there was a real sense of pride. Like Chelsea at this point felt like Chelsea again, and that hadn't been the case for a very long time. It was a draw, but it was also the best that Chelsea looked all season. And we didn't know it at the time, but it was the best that Chelsea would look all season. So as November turned into December, Chelsea's form from what was an unbeaten month and one defeat in their last 2 months, if you're including October, quickly nosedived into something that would be in need of like serious inquiry. 3 days after the Arsenal draw, Chelsea took a trip to Ellen Road and they played again a rotated side, a side with Tosin, Buddy Ashil, Liam Delap. Not to single them out specifically, but they were just prime examples of the rotation policy that was being forced on Maresca by the sporting directors to deal with the load management to get through this ultimately grueling season. Whenever they would start, we would just look miles off it. We lost that game 3-1. Tosin was largely at fault for that last goal. He was just caught dawdling on the ball, like on the 6-yard box, at which point we just didn't have anything left to give. It was disappointing given we'd gone the whole of November unbeaten, only to immediately lose away against the team in the grips of like a relegation scrap themselves. It was a sign of things to come. Chelsea played 8 games in December and they only won 1 of them. Defeats against Atalanta in the Champions League, meaning that Chelsea had dropped points in each of their away games in the Champions League. Chelsea's season was starting to feel like a number of highs being met almost immediately with a number of lows. Chelsea had that spirited 2-2 draw away at Newcastle, which came at a really weird time. I mean, Chelsea were 2 goals down, and this was right before Christmas. They fought back 2-2. They were 2-0 down after like 25 minutes, and the team looked really flat, but clearly whatever Maresca said to them at halftime really got them going again. The most notable thing that happened in December actually came between the Atalanta defeat and the Everton victory. They were on a 4-game winless streak. Cole Palmer scored his first goal since away in Munich. It felt like Chelsea are back on track now. It was a really convincing performance. They were much better than Everton. During the post-match press conference, Enzo Maresca came out and said that the 48 hours between the Atalanta defeat and the Everton victory was the worst 48 hours that he'd had as Chelsea boss.
The last 48 hours has been the worst 48 hours since I joined the club, because many people didn't support us, because people didn't support me and the team in general.
He really didn't expound on that. It caused a stir and a kerfuffle at a time when Chelsea really didn't need it. They were just coming off the back of a really poor run, and obviously now we know in hindsight it was one win that didn't really actually turn Chelsea's fortunes at all. And it was also around this time, it was also just before the Newcastle game, that it came out that in the event that Pep Guardiola would leave Man City, he would be touted as the favourite. Mind you, at the time he was only 18 months into a 5-year deal. The idea of Enzo Maresca at that moment leaving Chelsea was quite unthinkable. He was really endured by the fans, and even if Chelsea were going through bad spells, this was still a very young team, and many Chelsea fans always backed Maresca to find a way out of it. So there was no real reason conceivably that he would not be in a job in the relatively near future. I'm foreshadowing, obviously. It was so bizarre, and then every press conference he would be asked to expand, what did you mean, and are you happy in the job? Can you see yourself being Chelsea manager next season? And he would always say yes, but clearly things behind the scenes were much worse than what they appeared. Chelsea lost against Aston Villa on the 27th, the day after Boxing Day. They lost 2-1 at home, having scored first. It was like the Sunderland fixture. Got the first goal at home and still ended up losing. 3 days later, they played Bournemouth in what eventually Enzo Maresca's final game in charge, and it was another 2-2 draw. It was a game that Chelsea on another day would have definitely lost. They were not good that day, and Maresca skipped his post-match duties. When managers, head coaches in his case, when they start dodging their press duties, it's often not a good sign. His team came out the following day saying that he was feeling under the weather. On another day, he wouldn't have even attended the game. He would have probably left Willy Caballero in charge like he did in the Forest game when he was suspended. It was a really sad end. Enzo Maresca was a coach who definitely had his flaws. He also, over the 18 months that he had been in the job, his style of football didn't necessarily excite many Chelsea fans, didn't exactly excite neutrals either. I spoke earlier about how he often felt somewhat disconnected from Chelsea fans, and it felt like the second half of 2025, with the win in the Club World Cup, the victories over Liverpool, over FC Barcelona, the draw against Arsenal, he really did spend much of that time endearing himself, making himself feel like he's not just in for the long haul, but he's one of us. And it looked like at some point that he was one of us. And when he left on New Year's Day, it really was a shock. And then obviously it came out he wasn't even sacked. He walked on his own volition. He was the first manager in Premier League history to ever lose their job on New Year's Day. I think what's most telling about Maresca's departure, midway through the season, we were 19 games in. We had slipped down the table from 2nd to 5th, but we were still very much in the race for Champions League. We were still having a very respectable season. Even if we had a dodgy month in September and a dodgy month in December, like, we still only lost one game between October and November. The most telling thing was the number of thank you messages that were posted by Chelsea players Marco Correa, Enzo Fernandez. You'll see a bunch of them on screen now, thanking Maresca for the work that he did at Chelsea in the 18 months that he was there. And it felt like a real fractious moment between the Stamford Bridge faithful and the owners. They spent the best part of their first 3.5 seasons alienating themselves from Chelsea fans, ostracizing. They finally found a coach that was willing to work relatively well within their structures. They're very limiting structures, mind you. He was able to bring success. He was able to deliver Champions League football. He was able to deliver a style of play that they were hell-bent on implementing for one reason or another. But I digress. was a really devastating moment when Maresca left on New Year's Day. It was almost like the worst way to start the year as a Chelsea fan. When they say start as you mean to go on, these owners really did do that. January was a really weird month in the sense that Enzo Maresca obviously left on New Year's Day. It was also like the busiest time of the year. Chelsea had played 8 games in December and they had 6 or 7 more games coming up in January. Callum McFarlane was put in interim charge until Chelsea got their new man through the door. He was always going to be a temporary fix. It was just a matter of when. But it came out almost immediately that Liam Rosenior was going to be the man to take over. He was doing an admittedly quite a good job at Strasbourg. He missed out narrowly on the Champions League. He also had them punching relatively well above their weight in Liga. Within the BlueCo structures, it just made sense for him to be given a promotion. On paper, BlueCo do many things that don't make much, if any, sense. But this, given the circumstances, albeit it being circumstances that they created for themselves, these guys were trying to plug holes in a sinking ship that they punched the holes in to begin with. But anyway, Liam Rosenior was a coach who had only managed about 153 games in his career, most of which didn't even come at Strasbourg. They came at Championship side Hull. On paper, his appointment made sense in the idea that he is a man who understands the BlueCo structure. They knew more or less what they were going to get from him, the type of man that he is, the type of coach that he is, the style of football that he would be expected to implement. They'd worked together for 18 months. So for all of the things that you can control when appointing a head coach, a manager, whatever, he ticked all the boxes. I mean, quite literally halfway through the season, Chelsea had played 19 games in the league. They were sitting in 5th. The idea was that because he understands what's going on and he's stylistically not too dissimilar to Enzo Maresca, that there wouldn't be that much of a gulf. Clearly, the only thing that BlueCo failed to take note of would be the actual jump in task that the Englishman would face. Obviously, we drew 1-1 with City with Callum McFarlane, who actually coached something of a masterclass that day. Had Chelsea playing in this deep block and really focused on really hitting Man City in transition. Chelsea obviously stole a point at the death. Enzo Fernandez ducking one in at the back post to steal a point for Chelsea. Rosenior was in the stands with Berat Iqbali a few days later away at Fulham. We lost that game. Marco Correa got another red card. Liam Delap scored his only league goal of the season in a 2-1 defeat away at Fulham. If McFarlane coached the masterclass against Man City, the side looked found out almost immediately. Rosenior took charge of the following game, a 5-1 win away at Charlton.
Your surname is pronounced Rosenior.
My dad says Rosenior, which is the way to pronounce it, but as long as it's nice, you say something nice about me, I don't mind.
His start to life was quite positive. Wins over Paphos, Charlton, Crystal Palace away, West Ham at home, Napoli in the Champions League to help us qualify in a top 8 position. It looked like at first maybe there is some method to this madness, but whether it be like a new manager bounce or maybe even just a freshness of new ideas, during this run, Chelsea still very much looked like a Maresca team. Very ball dominant, very patient in possession, not taking too many risks, all of those things. You would say that it would be like even Chelsea were playing every 3 days for the first 2 months that Rosenior was there. He didn't have many chances to implement his own ideas, tactically, whatever. The only thing that I noticed was that Malo Gusto was allowed to hug the width. He's always been at his best as a touchline hugging fullback, other than one that's expected to invert. He struggled a lot with that, and I do think much of his decline has been in part down to being asked to fulfill roles and tasks within the team that just are almost antithetical to his skill set. He's really good at stretching teams down the line. He's really good at getting crosses into the box. At first year under Poch, part of the reason why he was such a success is because he was playing as a traditional marauding fullback. He was maybe one of a few people who seemed to really tick up performance-wise those early months. Chelsea navigated January relatively well. They came out relatively unscathed, but the new manager bounce was not going to last forever. I've been farting in this room and it is stinky. February was a bit of a challenging month. The initial new manager bounce seemingly wore off. Not all at once, but gradually enough to cause concern. Liam Rosenior managed 10 games in his first 31 days. He won 7 of them, drew 1 of them and lost 2 of them. One of the results I forgot to mention in the January segment was Chelsea played Arsenal at the end of the month in their Carabao Cup semi-final first leg. Chelsea just seemingly lacked quality that night. In many ways, you could say that they maybe looked scared against a team that was better than them. They held on for a 3-2 defeat. Alejandro Garnacho came off the bench and scored a brace. He almost single-handedly kept Chelsea in that game. Chelsea took a real passive approach. Like, Chelsea didn't look scared against Barcelona. They didn't look scared against Liverpool. They didn't look scared against PSG in the Club World Cup. And I think Maresca really worked hard at getting these players to believe that they could beat anyone on their day, that anything is possible within 90 minutes. Performance-wise, almost quite the opposite. Not to say that they were bad or that they were afraid, but they just approached the game very differently. And I think this really came to a head in the second leg. Chelsea went to the Emirates. They were only one down on aggregate. Liam Rosenior set the team up in a back five. It really looked like the idea was to maybe get to the hour mark, the 75-minute mark, and then really go for it. The only problem is when you start with a back five the way that Chelsea did that day, if you don't have many attacking options to rely on, reliable attacking options, Alejandro Garnacho, an out-of-form Liam Delap, an 18-year-old in Estevao, and Cole Palmer, who had looked half of the player that he was the season before, to bail themselves out. Even when he switched back to a back four, I think maybe 65 minutes in, they still weren't able to. And Kai Havertz scored in like the 97th minute. He broke away from a Chelsea corner. He went around, I believe it was Robert Sanchez who started that day and scored, and that really did feel like a dagger. Obviously Havertz and the acrimony between him and Chelsea, the club and the fans, pointed to the badge that day. They did an okay job at bouncing back. They beat Hull City in the FA Cup 4th round, beat Wolves, who would obviously end up finishing rock bottom in the league. But the Wolves win actually came sandwiched between a 1-1 draw at home to Burnley and a 2-2 draw at home to Leeds. It felt like Chelsea so unnecessarily dropped 4 points in 2 games that under Maresca, you can't help but feel we probably would have won both of them. And there really did seem to be something lacking, something by means of quality or something by means of mentality. In both games, they threw the lead away. Against Leeds, they were 2-0 up, and it really took 2 individual errors leading to both goals. Obviously meaning that Chelsea picked up 1 point out of a possible 6 against Leeds, and having lost back in December. And then against Burnley, Wesley Fofana got a red card. Yeah, Chelsea just absorbed way too much pressure against a relegation threatened side. You would imagine a side with Chelsea's quality would have been able to beat a team like Burnley, a team that finished second bottom, that showed a dearth of quality themselves all campaign long, and they just couldn't. They crumbled. They conceded from a corner in stoppage time. They nearly conceded from a second corner. Chelsea nearly lost that game. James Ward-Prowse came on, and his set pieces really just unraveled the whole team, and it showed that Chelsea just weren't quite the same. They weren't quite at it the way that they had been earlier in the season. Question marks were starting to form. March was really where Chelsea's season just went off the boil completely. They started the month with a 2-1 defeat away at Arsenal, having lost there the month prior. It felt like a real opportunity to make a statement of sorts. Chelsea were starting to meander. They were starting to watch their Champions League play slip through their fingers with ridiculous draws against Burnley and Leeds. They really needed to show that they still had a sense of respectability and sensibility about them. Obviously, having lost away at Arsenal a month prior in quite meek fashion meant that the fans really wanted to see a response. They got one for about 60 minutes, I'd say. And this was the game where I'm sure you've seen all of the clips of Declan Rice holding Jorel Hato in a chokehold, and then the ball cannons off of his elbow. There's almost 2 fouls in one, and David Raya goes to punch from one corner and he clatters João Pedro. I'm less inclined to believe that that's a penalty because, like, David Raya has to go somewhere. So I do kind of see why. There were a whole bunch of calls that weren't given. Anyway, Chelsea were 2-1 down with about 20 minutes left, and Gabriel Martinelli breaks down the left wing and Pedro Neto is the last man chasing him. All he really has to do is make sure that he doesn't come inside, because then he's got like the goal to face. Instead, Pedro Neto, with the 4 brain cells that he possesses, absolutely goes to clatter Martinelli in a last man challenge, doesn't get the ball. He's shown his second yellow card, which puts us on, I believe, 9 for the season. He gets sent off. Chelsea were 2-1 down with about 20 minutes to go, but before that, they still were very much in the game. They were playing quite well. They kept Arsenal very very honest for large parts of that game. And from that point onwards, they just kind of had to retreat into their shell, make sure that they didn't lose by more than just the one goal. And it was a real disappointment. Obviously, Chelsea lost both Carabao semis. They drew back in November when Maresca was still in charge with Caicedo's red card. That result meant that Chelsea had not won against Arsenal in each of their last 11 attempts spanning all competitions, which is quite unfathomable when you think about how dominant Chelsea were over Arsenal during the early 2000s and the 2010s. And it really does feel that since BlueCo took over in 22-23, which was also the first season that Arsenal really challenged for the league, they've challenged for the league every year since. Chelsea have since finished in the bottom half of the Premier League table 2 of the last 4 years. It feels like these two teams have been on very, very different trajectories. And you could argue that Chelsea have maybe been on this trajectory like since towards the end of the Abramovich era. But it just feels much more poignant. It feels much more noticeable now. Chelsea played Villa away 3 days later and they absolutely smoked Villa. João Pedro got his first hat-trick for Chelsea that day. But yeah, Chelsea looked really good. João Pedro looked really good that day. Chelsea were due to play PSG in like a week from then. And it felt like, okay, maybe this team might be able to pick up form. Chelsea needed extra time to beat Wrexham. They found themselves a couple goals down, but they were able to win that game in extra time. João Pedro came off the bench. He was in like the form of his life at this point. He was scoring a bunch. And then obviously the fated tie against PSG. The first 70 minutes, I would say, it was some of the best football I'd seen Chelsea play all season. They were away against the defending champions. This was the same team that they beat in New Jersey back in July. They fell 2 goals down, but they fought back really, really valiantly to get to 2-2. It was 2-2 with about 20 minutes left. It felt as if Chelsea's entire season almost came apart with one mistake. The levels of concentration and focus you need to play against a team of that caliber must be quite unthinkable. But Philip Jorgensen, who had been taking risks in build-up for most of the game, had his worst moment. Robert Sanchez had fallen out of favour with Rosenior a couple of weeks prior. Jorgensen started the Villa game. I thought he looked quite good. He didn't have much to do that day. I mean, Chelsea conceded after about 4 minutes and they still won 4-1. But he didn't have much to do that day. He looked far more confident with the ball at his feet than Robert Sanchez. And it feels like it's an issue that Maresca also really struggled with, because obviously Sanchez is like an infinitely better shot stopper. Philip Jorgensen does give you a lot more with his feet as far as build-up is concerned. And it was an experiment and the experiment failed. A lot of people are done with Philip Jorgensen, but I do think that he has a level of composure to him that can be honed quite usefully for like a top team one day. But yeah, that mistake that he made for the Vitinha goal absolutely killed us. We conceded 2 more, I think, from Kvaratskhelia late in the game, and Chelsea obviously lost the game 5-2. Losing 5-2 took a lot out of the team, it looked like, because even after Jorgensen made that mistake, he kept on playing out the back almost as if Rosenior had instructed him to do exactly that. But Enzo Fernandez was also like yelling at him at some point. There was a clip where he played Chelsea into trouble again and they nearly conceded. This was moments after the first goal as well. It looked like the team was really like coming apart, and obviously you can imagine needing that level of concentration for as long as they had, and to still end up losing the game 5-2 against unequivocally the best team in the world. It will take a lot out of you. Chelsea played Newcastle at home a few days later, and it was largely the same team. Rosenior wasn't really rotating in the same way, except for like the FA Cup games against like Wrexham and stuff that Maresca had been. They looked like a team that was scarred from what had happened in Paris, and they lost that game 1-0. A really weird moment where they just got in behind and scored and they were just able to hold on. Newcastle also had a terrible defense this season. They conceded every game. So for them to have also been able to have held on for a draw was really like quite disappointing. This was also the game where the pictures of Paul Tierney getting sucked into the Chelsea pre-game huddle came from. Chelsea did it for the first time against Aston Villa. It looked like a new ritual, and obviously the Villa players weren't happy. They were quite upset. Chelsea ended up winning the game 4-1, so it's like, hey, if this works, by all means. But if you're going to do it, and if you're going to have the ref be caught in the middle of it, you better make sure you win that game. And they lost that game, and Chelsea were really like the laughing stocks of the world, having held 5 in Paris, and then this thing came out, and then Rosenior at full time spoke about respecting the ball. They were trying to respect the ball, and
My players made a decision that they wanted to be around the ball, to respect the ball.
he also left. I mean, I'll speak a little bit more on Rosenior at the end, but he didn't do himself any favors with that comment or many of the sound bites that he came out with.
In English, manage, if you split the 2 words, words. It's man, age. You're aging men.
Garnered the nickname LinkedIn Liam after a while, but Chelsea obviously lost the second leg 3-0 in a game where it felt like the chances are slim but never zero. They conceded after like 5 minutes, and I think at that point we all knew Stamford Bridge had emptied out at about half time. Garnacho was handed a note. Chelsea are 8-2 down on aggregate, and there's like 8 minutes left on Garnacho's being handed a note by Rosenior, which is it was these little things that really had many people turn on him. Many people also saw him as like a BlueCo Nepo baby for getting the job in the first place, and then he would do this and speak about respecting the ball that would also just not sit well with fans. Chelsea ended March with a 3-0 defeat away at Everton, which meant that they had now lost each of their last 4 games, but they had conceded 3 or more in 3 of those 4 games as well, which also just didn't make for pretty reading. This was also when the stats came out. Chelsea have not lost X number of games without scoring since this year, and I'll put the stats up on screen now. It was just a really miserable time. The international break came at a good point because it really just felt like Chelsea had been playing non-stop football quite literally since November. They had lost their manager in that time, and the fan base was growing strained and the players were looking knackered. They were also playing many of these games looking like the Club World Cup was starting to take its physical toll the way that many people feared that it would have. So it just kind of felt like many things were going wrong at once. Chelsea had a man in charge that did not have the answers. It only got worse from here on. This is really where Chelsea's season started to implode. I'm sure there were many players and fans alike that were grateful for the March international break to come around when it did. Chelsea were just on a terrible losing streak. They had forgotten how to score goals. They had forgotten how to defend. They had seemingly since Paris just become a team that don't recognize themselves. So I'm sure there were many people who were just very grateful that the international break came around when it did. It was really weird because obviously Marc Cucurella and Enzo Fernandez also spoke out about the mess that had unfolded behind the scenes. Marc Cucurella spoke about how Chelsea have this really special project, but the transfer strategy, the transfer policy is really starting to let the club down. Obviously, when you ask players, if you can speak to any player, you can ask them, would you love to play for Barcelona? More often than not, they'll say yes, especially if they are from Barcelona, if that's where they hail from, and he obviously said that. I think Enzo Fernandez and his comments, when he was away on international duty and he was asked, what's one city one day you'd love to live in? It was a very low ball kind of question. He obviously said Madrid and how similar it is to Buenos Aires, and obviously that didn't go down well with fans, and felt like he was working for Real Madrid. Felt like he was really just offering himself. Mind you, this guy's still got 5 years left on his current deal or whatever. This BlueCo clown show was just becoming all that more ridiculous. Less so with Cucurella. He just seemed like a player who was concerned that Chelsea were meandering towards mediocrity, and it feels like we've been doing that for the last 4 years, with the exception of Maresca's season. It really has felt like that for a long time, that Chelsea are just happy to be there, or rather that the owners are just happy to have this newfound cash cow in London. Upon the players returning, Enzo Fernandez was given a too much ban by the club. Only problem was that those games were against Man City and Man United. You can say Enzo Fernandez, he does seem to have this bozo gene about him on international duty with Argentina. Obviously we lost the City game 3-0. Not much to speak about. They were just better than us. It was a terrible watch. And then the United game, we lost 1-0. And again, we just really showed no level of fight, no level of urgency. Mateusz Cunha's goal was taken quite well. The most prevalent thing that happened that night was not even anything that happened on the field, was actually the march that Not a Project CFC organized with some of the Strasbourg ultras and supporters in protest of BlueCo. They had so many people turn up to the march itself. It really did send a really powerful message. These owners are unfit custodians for this institution, for this club, and it garnered massive international support, and they, like the rest of us, are absolutely fed up with this ownership. It was quite telling that they marched before Man United, and obviously Man United have had many issues with their owners over the last couple of years, and even Sir Jim has come in and alienated sections of the fan base with his comments about immigrants, and all sorts of things. It was a really powerful moment in what turned out to be Rosenier's penultimate match in charge as Chelsea head coach. Yeah, I mean, 3 days later, we went away to Brighton. We lost 3-0. Liam Rosenior was obviously sacked the following day. He played a back five. It didn't work. Chelsea were just, again, second best, outclassed, outfought, outrun. It was quite poignant that 2 of Rosenier's last 3 games were against Man City and Brighton. Because in many ways, this ownership have tried to model themselves after these 2 teams and have done a horrible job at doing that. They try to recruit like Brighton and they try to play like Man City, and they get neither side right. I mean, it's interesting because Liam Rosenior retired as a player at Brighton. During this really, really barren spell, Chelsea would now win this in like 7 games or whatever it was. And they'd only managed to score in one of them. It was the longest scoreless run that Chelsea had ever endured in the Premier League era. It was also like with the protests on the Saturday and the game on Tuesday, 3 days later, the Brighton defeat was the first time the Chelsea fans had gone from chanting about Clearlake to chanting about Rosenior and how he was unfit for the job. And And obviously he was sacked the following day. It came like to no surprise really. Like he was sacked 4 months into a 6.5-year contract. Chelsea's owners have failed this club at every turn. Even when they found a head coach in Maresca to really shape and mold the future around, they weren't able to keep him. And he didn't even try to get sacked. He walked out for free. They brought in a guy who was severely underqualified and the club suffered, lost out on Europe entirely. Morale was shot to pieces. Nobody seemed to believe in anything, the players or the fans.
Editor Kito here. Just in case it wasn't clear to anyone, I did film this video before the Man City news about the compensation that Maresca was set to pay and everything that came out since, that he basically quit once he found out that he was offered the Man City job, and how he effectively made the situation untenable at Chelsea on New Year's Day. That's why it sounds like I'm almost doing Enzo Maresca propaganda, even though I do know now after the fact. I filmed this before any of this came out, but I just wanted to say that I do stand by everything that I said about BlueCo. I still think BlueCo are largely to blame, not necessarily just for the Maresca situation, but for everything that's happened since. I do think that they have a chance now with Xabi Alonso to make it right, to rectify their wrongs from before. Upon reflection, and like I said, with this new news that has come out over the last couple of weeks, with Maresca's apology, he came out and said that he was also partly to blame. He did effectively tank our season. I do think that if they could have found an agreement for him to have left at the end of the season and not just tank everything that he had done, the goodwill. I do think that he will be received very poorly at Stamford Bridge. I think we play them in April of next year only, so we'll have to wait for that. I do think that the blame is probably at this point 60 BlueCo, 40 Maresca, maybe 50-50, but with BlueCo's track record, it's impossible to say, so I just wanted to add that.
There isn't really much to speak about in May. Chelsea won one game against Tottenham, our annual victory over Tottenham. Callum McFarlane got Chelsea to the FA Cup final, but we lost the final because we played against Man City. The sort of vintage Man City side, like Anton Semenyo scored a back heel in the final. The most telling thing about Rosenier's sacking was the moment of self-reflection that it triggered from the hierarchy. It was the first time in about 4 years where they actually seemed to be like, hey, maybe we actually got this wrong. I mean, they've gotten many things wrong, but they've never really admitted to it. They sacked Potter and they were just like, we go again. These are the pitfalls of owning a football club, especially if you're new to it. They let Pochettino go. I know many Chelsea fans weren't quite big on him. I think I'd say I was in the minority that actually wanted him to stay. I think he got us playing a brand of football that, I mean, it was chaotic and we couldn't defend, but it was a lot of fun. And I do think that if he was given the time at Spurs, he might have. But I think now we also know that this BlueCo ownership, as much as they preach that they want to build a project, that they want to give him a coach time, they just haven't afforded it to anyone. And then the one guy that they did afford it to in Maresca, they let him walk. You lose your best centre-back. I'm going to sound like a broken record now, but you lose your best centre-back and your employers just are like, no, you're just going to have to figure this one out on your own. But here's a bunch of teenagers, and yeah, let's just hope you can replicate last season's success while actually having more on your to-do list. But yeah, I think with Rosenior, like I said earlier, like the working out made sense, but I think they probably just failed to realize that Strasbourg, with all due respect to Strasbourg and Chelsea, are just not the same level of task. When you're a head coach, a manager, whatever you want to call it, at a club of Chelsea size, you are effectively like a spokesman. You Rosenior, with the respecting the ball comments, the aging men comments, all of these things that came out, Caicedo's contract extension, he became a meme all the time. I mean, it was really quite difficult because he's a young and upcoming manager, and he's also a black manager, and there aren't many black managers, especially not in the Premier League. So there are a lot of reasons why you would want him to succeed, both on and off the field, and it just didn't happen, and he became another needless victim in this BlueCo whirlwind, in this BlueCo cycle. He was doing a good job at Strasbourg, and BlueCo also just effectively uprooted his whole career. For what? You really have to think. Yeah, I mean, obviously they've appointed Xabi Alonso. I think I'll make a video on Xabi Alonso. It is just a real disappointment, and Chelsea, who started the season and they were nailed on Champions League favourites, they were seen as a team that could potentially go far in the Champions League, especially after the win over Barcelona, especially within that first 70 minutes. They didn't even make it to full time against PSG, but there were reasons to believe that Chelsea could have still accomplished something. But it's the third season in 4 that they have failed to qualify for the Champions League. It's the third season in 4 that they have finished the season without silverware, and it's also the second season in 4 that they have finished in mid-table. There's a real argument to be made that Chelsea are a mid-table club. In many ways, Xabi Alonso is Chelsea's last chance at being taken seriously. They don't have Europe. They really do have an opportunity. You look at what Man United did this season, like there's a real opportunity to do something. But then again, question marks over recruitment. Xabi Alonso, will he be given as much time to embed his ideas? He's signed a 4-year deal. He's also been given the title of manager over head coach, which is admittedly a step in the right direction. But you can't help but wonder, like, will BlueCo give him what he needs in order to make his goal a reality? Like, Xabi Alonso he's the best option that we could have gotten within the current managerial market. He's young and upcoming. He's a championship winner. And even like unequivocally, everything that happened at Real Madrid, I think in hindsight we'd all agree that none of it was really his fault. It does fill you with confidence, but this ownership are also so backward. They're so stubborn. They're so hard-headed for no actual reason. You can't help but wonder, like, will he do this? Like, will this happen? Just to round it off, this, in my opinion, is Chelsea's worst season ever because of the expectation that was set at the start of the campaign. Chelsea was seen as outside shots for the title as late as November, and they ended the season in 10th. And you even look at seasons like 22-23, like you can watch my video on that, or like 15-16. Like in 15-16, Chelsea were defending champions and they came 10th. It was the other time they came 10th. But it just feels like that was a championship winning team that was having an exorbitantly bad year. I mean, the manager was sacked, like Mourinho was sacked, but he was almost on a goal to take everything down with him. He was like on a really self-destructive path. And it showed that the chaos that he left behind wasn't long lasting because Chelsea literally went on to win the league the following year. And even with 22-23, like there was a massive squad overhaul. You could almost understand why the club was as much of a mess as it was because they signed 16 players. I'm not going to get into that. I have a whole video up. You can go watch the video. But it's just like Chelsea, for how they were seen and where they ended up finishing, was so contrasting. You don't even really know what the future holds. It is a real worry, but I guess we'll just have to deal with all of that stuff when it comes. You guys can let me know in the comments, was this Chelsea's worst season ever? Was 22-23 worse? Was 15-16 worse? Are there any that I'm missing? Those are obviously just the glaring ones. Thank you for tuning into Kitso's Blues. I'm Kitso. These have been my blues. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. Videos are going to be coming in thick and fast from this point onwards. Yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful day and I'll see you very soon. Bye.